Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Metroid Prime Remastered. In the last part we got ourselves the gravity suit, and then won a little bit of a collectathon throughout Magmoor Caverns and especially Chozo Ruins to get a lot of items, and now it's time for us to finally head back to the crashed frigate site. Thankfully it's a relatively straight shot because Talon Overworld is... I'm not going to say it's the smallest area, but it's definitely the most condensed in its overall structure. There is a long stretch of level design, and we're coming up on it technically, but otherwise it's pretty quick to get from place to place in this region more than any others. Now, you could have entered the crashed frigate before getting the gravity suit, but you wouldn't really be getting anywhere fast without it, because a lot of it is underwater. Also, I am once again forgetting to scan the gunship. Remember, do that if you haven't. Not that it's ever missable, it's just good to have done it. Although I would recommend saving right there especially, as we're coming up on easily the most missable of missable scans in the game besides boss fights, because most of the missable scans in the game, there's a couple of rooms they show up in, or at least you can be in the room where they show up multiple times, like with the Ice Shriek bats. We're coming up on a scan type that there's only 2 of, and you only see them on our first visit through the frigate. So make sure you scan those, and I'll talk about them in specific when we get there. So now that we have the gravity suit, we can also come down here, ignore this gel sap almost entirely, and jump over here to get this missile tank. Again, I think there is a way to get this without the gravity suit if you jump from the room we entered this area with, and just hit a very specific decline into it. Kind of a hard shot? Yes. But, oh well. I like to look at the frigate, though, here, as sort of the ultimate, you can find your way here early on, but they really don't want you doing stuff here until later area, because in order to actively progress in this area, you need at least the ice beam, the gravity suit, the thermal visor, and the wave beam. Not that there's many cases where you could get here without the wave beam in particular, for instance, but... you could, because you can technically come into the area where you can approach this place as early as you get the missiles, I believe, because I think the door that we use to get from here to where the gunship is blocked on either side with a blast shield, but you're just not able to do much in that room otherwise. Ah, auto turrets. I remember when you were remotely threatening in terms of the damage you did. Now it's no problem at all. The reason you need the thermal visor and the wave beam is that frequently you need to power conduits in this area. In fact, there's more power conduits here than basically any other area of the game. I would argue almost that this area is the entire reason why the thermal visor exists for that purpose. Also, we got a rare reskin of the parasite and scarab enemies there that only really appears in this one room. Weird. So, it took me a while to realize this is meant to be the room where we actually fought the Queen Parasite back in part 1. We have a new enemy here that's actually kind of hard to tell as a new enemy here. We have an Aqua Pirate, which is just an underwater variant of the Flying Pirate and dies just about as easily. 2 to 4 missiles and or a Ice Beam shot followed by a missile can take them out pretty quickly. I love the underwater frigate theme though, it's so peaceful. As much as I miss the first Talon Overworld theme, this is another one of my favorite Metroid pieces, just period. Also, you're kind of seeing the problem with the Ice Beam here. It's powerful and it can freeze enemies, but it's easily the slowest out of all the beams in terms of its distance speed, or its traveling speed. So while it is theoretically one of the more powerful beams, it can be rather limited by that. I think this is also the only time in the game there are 4 power conduits you need to activate in order to open a door to. Usually, there are 3 at most. I really like this area, though, because it's sort of a revisit to the concept of the wrecked ship from Super Metroid, but done in a way that feels, I'm not going to say more interesting, but definitely more engaging, I guess? Because the wrecked ship, you just find it there. It's not like it's a chunk of the space station Ceres that just crashed down on Zebes for some reason. This is places you've been before, just completely recontextualized by your current abilities and it being underwater. Speaking of which, fire a missile at the elevator and there's now an energy tank in here for some reason. I think it'd be kind of funny if you look at like the ceiling of the elevator when we're in that back in like part 1, there is like an energy tank-shaped object in the ceiling, but unfortunately no such thing exists, as funny as that would be. All the humor in these games generally goes for the spacebar logs, weirdly. We haven't gotten to the funniest ones, though. That's technically later this part, and a good bit of next part, for reasons we will talk about then. With that said, there is always a part of me with the wrecked frigate that thinks I'm missing something for some reason. And it mostly comes down to the fact I swear there's one more item in this area than there is. And I'm not sure if that's just some Mandela effect kind of stuff, or it's the fact that I figure there should be more items in the area that we started the game off in when we revisit it for some reason. So now we're coming up on the room that had our first pirate data back in part 1. That is still a missable scan. You cannot get it when it's here because all the computers are off downstairs, but something I actually forgot to scan when we were here the first time around. One of these little cages around the area on the first visit contains one of the Zebus monsters, the one that's like two-legged and jumps around and shoots needles out of the side of it. And that's pretty neat. But there's also something else important here. This, the Aqua Drone, security mecha, blah blah blah. It's a security drone, only it's underwater and is counted as a separate enemy, and there are only 2 of them in the game, and they are both right here. Scan them if you're going for 100%, otherwise you will lose out on this scan forever. Mind you, I say that, but I'm not sure if you can, like, kill these 2, go, like, 2 rooms down the line, come back and they'll respawn. I'm not sure if it's, like, getting the next major item that despawns them permanently. But either way, there are not many of them, so scan them ASAP if you're going for the 100% scan log. Again, though, not like getting the scan log does a lot besides bragging rights. For the most part, what it gets you is just concept art in the gallery, which you unlock some of that both by getting scan logs, getting a certain amount of the items, as well as just collecting main pickups to begin with. And there's actually more of like a gallery here in Metroid Prime Remastered than there was in the original game. In fact, they even separated into, here's concept art and area art for the original game and for the remake. So you get to see a lot of just how the game came to look the way it does for both versions. And I appreciate that a lot. I think most games like this only really focus on the remake in some cases, maybe have the original piece of art next to it. I appreciate the distinguishing of the 2 different types of galleries. I don't have all the gallery stuff myself because I need to beat hard mode for that, and I honestly do not care about playing hard mode in Metroid Prime. But it's there. I guess I probably should talk about it though. If memory serves, hard mode is the same in all 3 Prime games, even if it gets renamed in Prime 3. I believe it's that you do half damage, but enemies do double. So you need to be very careful about your positioning and be very aggressive with your shots if you want to do some real damage. Not that it's a big change, but at least there is one. The main reason I don't really go for it is because usually when I play this game, I play through on normal, maybe unlock hard if it's on a new memory card at that point on my GameCube, and then just put the game down. Metroid hard modes seldom interest me to begin with. The only one I think I've actually fully played to completion is maybe Zero Mission and Dreads at this point, because I just don't care otherwise. Maybe if Fusion had one, I played it at some point or another. I really doubt it, though. I don't even remember it having one off the top of my head. There are some games that I love to death, but unless I'm actively playing them, memory of what goes on and where just kind of leaves my mind. Makes playing ongoing series kind of weird, like the Trails games. Here's a relatively rare enemy, that's the Aqua Sac. It's sort of like the sap sacks in the main town overworld, but underwater. But thankfully they're not a limited scan, they're always there. And now we got a big morph ball tunnel. You can hear it, there's a power up in here, and it's a relatively easy one to get. You just need to do an underwater version of the double bomb jump. But I think you actually need 3 bombs to do this. Without the spring ball, so in original Metroid Prime, that can be kind of tough. Trilogy and Remastered gets that a lot easier. I wish we got more underwater morph ball. I think its physics are kind of floaty and fun, but it's only really done there in like 1 or 2 other rooms, period. And there we go. We are actually now out of the crashed frigate. We are on the far end of the town overworld. And you could try to go up that giant room, but there's nothing for you there. There's just a wall blocking the way. Intense radiation detected, because if you look below us just then, there was a bunch of Phazon. We're now entering the final main area of the game we have yet to technically be in, the Phazon Mines, that was talked about in, I think some of the pirate data at some point. I think it was one back at the Fendrana pirate hideout. And if you've thought this game so far, if you're playing it for your first time, is pretty easy for the most part, not a lot to danger, pretty good to stay high on health in, this is the part of the game that's meant to kind of kick you in the ass, because this area is a endurance round. I do really like the music here, though. The main reason this is an endurance round is, A, there's a lot of enemies here that are new and can kick your ass, like the heavy turrets here, or mega turrets. They're just heavier versions of the auto turrets, but the main thing is save point starvation. This save point is the only one you're going to have access to until we get to the end of the area that we need to explore here right now, and after that there's only one at the very end near, will eventually be the climactic boss fight of this region. Unfortunately, that's a far way away from us, so we gotta go get to even the middle point here. With that said, there are plenty of items we're gonna be able to grab here, even on our first visit, although some of them we're gonna need to wait for our way back through to this save point. For now, though, we gotta take down this dual control force field. The activation controls are likely nearby. In fact, they're literally 5 feet away. Why even have that besides an in-lore security measure? I don't know. Before we go into the main entrance, though, we want to come up to the top of this weird little crane doohickey, because there are a couple of things we can do up here. First off is kill these space pirates. Not that they're much of a threat. 2 missiles or a super missile can take them down pretty quickly. But we want to investigate the panel in that their little glass tube in order to make some magic happen around here, essentially. Also, I don't think there's a way to, like, shortcut over to that ice beam door in the distance. If there is, it probably involved a scan dash in the original version of Prime, more so than any of the future revisions of it. But before we can investigate that panel, we do need to power it back up, though. So this leads to an item I frequently missed. In fact, I'd say it's probably one of the items I missed the most in playthroughs of Prime. And not that it's super important, it is just another missile tank, and I already have half of them now in the game, so I'm doing pretty good on that regard. That moves the crane over there, and now we can spider ball up to that and get this missile tank. I do like how the game makes you rely on listening for the little humming that the item pickups makes in some cases, instead of just having to rely on visual identification. But there are times where the way they hint at things can be just a little too cryptic, I find. Also, before we leave this room, I do recommend you swap this crane back to where it was by scanning that computer again. Although I'm not sure, actually, if just leaving and coming back eventually will have it turned back to where it is also. I'm not actually sure, because I always do this. Although, in retrospect, a part of, I think it was Sector 3 with the desert and Other M kind of reminds me of this area, just because of the crane moving mechanic. That room was cool. It was one of the more interesting rooms in Other M, if only there was more like it. Might as well scan that auto turret disabling mechanism. I'm surprised. I like that they actually have that through a lot of the game. If there's ever auto turrets, there's usually something you can scan to turn them off. It's not super important, but I like that that's there. Okay, so I mentioned this place being an endurance round, and you see that as early as this room, because we're going in a gigantic spiral upwards just through a lot of pirates, including a completely new type that can be kind of annoying to deal with on a first playthrough. On repeat playthroughs is more just tedious, and I tend to ignore fighting against them unless it's absolutely mandatory. And we'll see that right when we turn this corner up here. Meet the first of the pirate troopers. This in particular is the Wave Trooper. The Troopers are space pirates that have essentially reverse engineered our beam technology to make armor out of it. The big weakness in their design, though, they are vulnerable only to the thing that their armor is based off of. So Wave Troopers can only be damaged with the Wave Beam and Wave Buster. I recommend just using the Charge Beam, though, rather than using your missiles in the Wave Buster, because it takes like 3 to 4 charge shots, and a main charge shot will stun them in place long enough that you can just not have to worry about them. I find these enemies to be fun in concept because it means you actually have to use all your beam weapons and not rely on a favorite. I just wish they introduced them in a better pacing than we do here, because we see all 3 of the variants we have the beams for on this first visit. Not to mention, I wish they had a little bit of a different strategy for each one besides just the beam, like maybe Wave Troopers can paralyze you and make your visor get all staticky like the Pulse Bomb Boost can. And I guess their slashes can technically do that, but I wish they had something more to distinctify them. This room is one of several in the Phazon Mines I'm not the biggest fan of, though not because of actually getting up there and getting to the next room. That's easy. It's mostly because one of the items in here I find to be one of the more tedious ones to get, even if it is still relatively quick. But we do have more pirate data now, though. Let's see, this is log 11.001.9. Initial Project Helix experiments with space pirate embryos were disastrous. The Phazon infusion process degenerated brain tissue even as it augmented muscle mass. None of what we have termed elite pirates lived to maturity. The few that survived their infinite suffered severe psychotic breakdowns as juveniles, killing anything within their zone of perception. Research team Sclera recently made a breakthrough in which parasite studies with a Phazon strain codenamed Vertigo were highly successful. Since then, we have successfully fused Vertigo Phazon with space pirate DNA with great success. The latest batch of elite pirates have reached maturity successfully and are ready for field testing and training. Great, so they're doing eugenics on themselves, and they're glad about it. Fantastic. I guess eugenics by genetic research, it's the same deal when it comes to high-level sci-fi, isn't it? Ugh. Most of what you're going to be fighting here are standard pirates early on. It's around this room on that you're mostly going to just start seeing commandos of some... no, commandos is prime too. Troopers of some sort. In particular, at the top of this room, we're going to encounter our first power trooper, which you can take one of those with just a super missile, no problem. And I think it's more worth your time than just using a couple of charge shots. Especially for a secondary reason of the super missile I haven't really talked about yet. Security alert, all stations. Bioform Samus Aran has made planetfall on Talon 4. The Hunter is among us. All units are hereby ordered to attack Aran on sight. Terminal Force is authorized to report all sightings of Aran to Security Command. So something I haven't really talked about with the super missiles is that they are one of the few items in the game that have a massive splash damage effect. I think normal missiles have it a little bit as well, but with super missiles, if you hit something with it, anything that's like right next to it is just also going to die. For instance, if there is another power commando next to a power commando you are targeting with a super missile, they're probably both going to end up dead, and that saves you the ammo, so it's worth using. And that's all it takes. So here's the part of this area I'm not a big fan of. We got a gigantic mining laser here. And if you want to progress, you need to blast it right here in the center just to open up the next ice beam door. Cool, cool. The problem is, about 3/4 of the way along this rotation, I think it's that wall in particular right there, is a missile expansion. So we need to just use our boost ball over and over again to get it over there, and it takes just a little bit too long and too many presses for me to like it. I'm not saying I want instant stuff, but this is just not a very interesting puzzle. Especially on a first playthrough, because you're probably going to end up using this laser at every single wall you can blast here to try and figure out where the missile expansion is. It's just kind of rough. So I am going to forewarn you a little bit coming up here. We do end this part not abruptly, but it's just kind of a weird break where there's nothing going on, if only because, like with the last Space Pirate base we raided, there's not many places to end besides the save point at the end, and even then I go right from there back to the start without using the save point that's down there anyway, if memory serves. It's just the unfortunate circumstance with what goes on in this area. But this room's a little interesting. We have several little morph ball bomb slots we can use that are sadly not the normal morph ball slot. I think by now I started to realize I didn't have those scanned. Bombing in here makes the central platform rotate, and there's 3 spider ball tracks on it that when completed take you up to either the 1/3, 2/3, or top mark of this room. You just gotta make the tracks complete. The slightly annoying thing about this, though, is that rotating a higher section doesn't make the lower section rotate as well. So in this case, where we need to use the red track in order to get to our next destination, we need to bomb twice here, and then I think 3 times down at the lower one to complete the track, and that just... it's not tedious, it's just slow enough to be annoying. Not that a consistent pace is an issue in Prime, especially if you know where you're going, you move about in this game at such a consistent pace that's not super noticeable, but on our first playthrough, this is definitely a bit of a pace breaker area, especially for an area that's otherwise very action-oriented. It's just kind of weird. Also, I hear that enemy in the distance, but I am actually not electing to ignore you. I thought I did. I thought I would let you live and you could tell your friends about me, but clearly, I was wrong. Sorry about that. Also, in both of the rooms that look like this, around that room, I just tend to jump downwards, even though it takes some damage, especially from the large electricity things in the first room, just because it's faster. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Want to thank you guys for watching, and in part 10, now that we're, I guess, near the bottom of the impact crater, we're going to explore some of the further reaches of the Phazon Mines. See you guys then.